Thank you, Bridget. And continuing our coverage, City Council member Greta Starr is here to talk about this resolution. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
About 2 weeks ago, you announced on Twitter that the city of Austin stopped pursuing low-level marijuana cases. You're calling this a war on drugs that target communities of color. Now, do you think this is a proper step to change this?
For too long, we have pursued a failed strategy of the war on marijuana, which has turned into a war on people that's been heavily felt, especially by communities of color. People have lost their jobs, have lost their student financial aid. Families could even be separated by deportation for something as small as a low-level marijuana offense, and it just hasn't worked. And so the right step would be for the state of Texas to step up to the plate and do what other states have done, legalize and regulate marijuana, and that makes us all safer and better off. But between here and then, between here and the state doing the right thing for cities to do is to stop dedicating so many resources pursuing low-level marijuana cases and instead invest in the community.
Councilmember, last week we got the chance to sit down with District Attorney Moore on this issue, and this is what she shared is a concern in our community. Just take a listen.
What we've seen that is alarming is an increase in violent crime that goes along with marijuana and THC distribution or dealing. And what I would hope is that whatever the City Council decides to do, they would take steps to avoid impacting our ability to prosecute dealers.
Mr. Kassar, would your proposal address the concerns of prosecutors?
Yeah, this proposal very clearly has to do with not pursuing these low-level marijuana possession cases. And so anything having to do with violent crime issues and also felony trafficking as described by the prosecutor, we're not trying to change or impact that. But the fact of the matter is, the path that the city has recently been on has been to continue pursuing these low-level cases, even at increased cost. So while there may be a Willie Nelson statue across the street from City Hall, while we might have a reputation for being more compassionate and open-minded about this sort of thing, that's not how the city has been. We have had to work really hard to dramatically decrease low-level marijuana offenses, but we're still giving out citations. And our resolution, what it aims to do is to stop, messing up folks' lives for doing something that is less dangerous than having some beers with your friends. And we know that so often it is poorer communities that are, when you've got an arrest warrant, when somebody has to miss some days of work, when somebody has those sorts of issues, it's just not worth us dedicating the resources to these low-level offenses. And so the goal, I think, does not interfere with what the prosecutor raised. Instead, what the resolution would do is spend those resources more wisely when we're talking about the low-level cases.
And let's look more into the testing. There's so much that goes into this. The cost of THC testing falls on Austin Police, and DPS is expected to roll out a new testing method soon. But your proposal says the city would not use funds to develop any testing methods. So have you gotten a chance to hear back from APD on their thoughts on this?
The Austin Police Department has to do their job and enforce whichever laws the state of Texas passes. The City Council also has to do our jobs and decide how to prioritize what the police department and our municipal court system should be working on. And I think if you ask the everyday Austinite, what is it that we should focus on, they would put low-level marijuana possession near the bottom of the list. We should not be continuing to chase down penalties for low-level pot cases. In fact, it can make us less safe. We heard at a press conference this morning, which your station covered, from a constituent, a person here in Austin who was suffering relationship violence and sexual violence, but it made it really hard for her to interact with the police department when it wound up that she wound up in handcuffs because she had a joint in her bag. And that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make us safer. And I think we will be safer when people have stability in their lives and when their lives aren't being derailed for something like having low-level amounts of marijuana.
Let's talk about any backlash. Are you concerned from any backlash from Governor Greg Abbott on this?
No, I mean, the fact of the matter is our conservative-controlled Texas House passed a bill to decriminalize marijuana. It did not wind up all the way to the governor's desk, but this is an issue that actually has support from all sides. It's a criminal justice reform, it's a racial equity policy, but it's also just plain common sense. And so I believe that we can continue to be an example to the state of Texas, and an example of how if we better prioritize our resources and we come out of the Stone Ages on marijuana reform, that we're actually all better off.
Councilmember, final thoughts. A lot of people are saying that if this resolution passes, we might see more people smoking on the streets of Austin. Do you think this would be a concern, and how would police maybe go about addressing that issue?
The fact of the matter is, the state of Texas has kept marijuana a criminal offense. What we are trying to do is remove the penalties associated with that offense and the extra police resources dedicating to chasing that down. And so the fact of the matter is, if this resolution passes, people may still have their marijuana confiscated if a police officer spots you. But the fact of the matter is, we don't want to pursue the case. We don't want to set a court date, make you pay fees, potentially arrest you or give you an arrest warrant. That's what the city council is able to do, is to remove those sorts of penalties and that sort of enforcement. But there still could be continued confiscation of marijuana, but what we're not going to do is mess up somebody's life over it.
All right, well, Councilmember Greta Starr, we're looking forward to that meeting on Thursday. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much. It's a really important issue.